Next person that we're going to introduce, our next candidate is running for Minnesota State Auditor. He's going to be the busiest of the bunch, I'm sure. Keegan Iverson.
Keep going, Daddy. Go ahead.
He likes long romantic walks at McDonald's. Just kidding. He's another Minnesota native. He's worked in rural occupations, farming, and working on heavy equipment until he joined the Air National Guard in 2004. Since that time, he has earned his MBA, and he's also worked as a contractor within the U.S. consulate in Iraq. He is married to his wonderful high school sweetheart, Amy. They have been blessed with 2 children, and he's an all-around great guy, one of my favorites, Keegan Iverson.
Thank you. I'm gonna stay up at the podium a little bit here today and try and keep everything in the lanes for us. I would like to explain to you what the state auditor actually is, because not a lot of people know what the state auditor is. You never hear about it until there's an election, you know, because it doesn't represent you in any way. Basically it's been a seat warmer position for a number of years that the taxpayer pays, you know, roughly $20 million a year for the auditing that it does, and $102,000 a year for the state auditor. And you don't hear anything about it because nothing's really happening. Okay, so let me explain to you. The state auditor is a constitutional officer. The Minnesota Constitution says the oath of office of state auditors is, each officer created by this article before entering upon his duties shall take an oath or affirmation to support the Constitution of the United States and of this state, and to discharge faithfully the duties of his office to the best of his judgment and ability. I think it's a very important statement, and I think it's lost on a lot of politicians right now who do not respect the Constitution in any way. Today we've talked about violations of the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, But anyways,
Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth.
Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendments. I hear about all that stuff. Nobody respects them at all. Okay? So, a little bit about the state auditor. The state auditor is a leader of multiple divisions. The role of the state auditor involves auditing, reviewing, investigating, reporting, and educating. The state auditor also serves on the State Executive Council, the State Board of Investment, the Land Exchange Board, Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, Public Employee Retirement Association, the Rural Finance Authority Board, and all those roles and responsibilities are very important to the state of Minnesota. Okay? So, Minnesota is one of 8 states that has both a state auditor and a legislative auditor. So a lot of it goes back and forth, so there's a lot of finger pointing. One of the things that I would like to do is take the legislative auditor's position and roll it into the state auditor. That way when we have issues like MNsure, okay, $150 million gets spent on a single website. A website that provides leads for 6 HMO agencies. Who in their right mind spends $150 million on a website to fill 6 hotels? Because it does not administer the insurance. It is only a lead provider. That is all the MNsure website is set up to do for $150 million. Some people are saying there's some fraud there. Nobody wants to investigate it.
How do you think they got their guns?
The Federal Health and Human Services Department has determined the need to audit the MNsure program. Jim Nobles, who is the legislative auditor, has said he wanted to do a review as time allows and as money allows. But not a full audit. Okay? We have the Minnesota Data Privacy Act. That allows the state to audit any organization that accepts state funds. But there's one exemption to that rate. That's the insurance companies and the HMOs. And they carve these things out and they don't say it. As a state auditor, I want to make sure that's fair for everybody, for every business. If you're going to accept state money, you're willing to be audited. You're willing for us to come in there and take a look under the hood and find out what's going on. If money's missing, then it's not, we're sorry. It's, no, you need to pay us back for our civil liabilities. If there's criminal culpability, you need to go to jail. So I have some proposals to the office that I will be making to the legislation. And that is to allow risk analysis and contract feasibility to be part of TIF approval. TIF approval is tax increment financing. Anybody that knows what tax increment financing is, it has to pass a test called but-for. So if it weren't for the state supplying this money to build that, or improve that, or to do that, then it would not happen. Well, if it weren't for the state's money, why are we doing it in the first place? If you look at the TIF program in and of itself, you'll find many, many, many ways for potential fraud and abuse. You'll see that there are companies that say, you know what, I own a trucking company, and I would like to build a new depot, a new place to work on my trucks. So you know what, instead of taking the money out of my pocket, I'll say it's something for economic development, I'll put it into a TIF program, then I'll have the state taxpayers pay for it. It's wrong, it doesn't make any sense. Another place that TIF gets abused is forgivable loans. Okay, you take out a loan with somebody, it's not a grant. You take out a grant when you're not going to get the money. You take out a loan, it's meant to be paid back, even if it's a forgivable loan. It needs to have a risk analysis done. So if they're defaulting on the loan, it doesn't automatically get rolled into a TIF program and put right back on the shoulders of the taxpayer. State auditor is not doing that for you right now. So I want to allow for analysis of the entire TIF program. I want to allow the OSA, Office of State Auditor, to conduct investigative audits on any public official for financial fraud, waste, embezzlement, and physical theft.
Not even on that staff.
The state auditor shouldn't be just looking, it shouldn't be a bean counter. It is not a bean counter position when you're on the state's executive council. Not in any way. That is an authoritative position that helps guide and direct the state. I want to reduce the reporting requirements of cities and municipalities and replace those programs with full audit by petition, driving competition for tax dollars to private markets. And what I want to do with that is there's these municipalities that are pretty small out there in Minnesota. Maybe they only got 2,000, 5,000 people. Why do they need the state auditor to come in there and hold their hand and audit them? Why do they need it? They don't. We ought to just say, if you want me to come in and help you audit this, then sign a petition, fill out a paperwork, I'll come in and I'll audit. Otherwise, the requirement to have all that is just extra money. It should be handled by a local auditor or CPA. When the dollar amounts are that small, it is more redundancy. If you have a citizen that makes $200,000 a year and we audit that person completely every 5 years, you'd say that was nuts. It's too much. Okay, so we need to reduce that scope and that position as well. I would like to give public employees the option to opt out of group PIRA plan for individual 401 type of portable plans and matching funds. The reason for that is within PIRA right now, each public employee fund that's out there pays 2.4% management fee. 2.4% management fee on anybody's money would not pass compliance in the private agency. It would not. So what happens when we're short money? They have to go back and pass another omnibus spending bill like 1951, which is, you can look it up, to pay the shortcoming that's within those PIRA funds. Why should the taxpayer pay for it while somebody's milking our employees? Those are our employees, those are people that want to serve us as citizens, and they want to do a good job. So why am I going to charge them 2.4%? That's typically reserved for very variable funds. They only have 5 funds to choose from. They don't need to pay that kind of management fee. By taking that taking the slush off the top, we're putting it, the state puts it back on the pier board, puts it back on the taxpayers to refund that, and that's wrong. So sitting on the pier board. I want to allow for full inventory audits of state and local facilities as needed, so we can catch fraud, waste, abuse, and embezzlement. It's one thing to audit the financing, but if you're a state auditor, you ought to be able to go in and physically inventory as well for anything that's theft. Okay, anything except now as needed. So only by question and petition. I don't want to show up and do it to somebody that doesn't deserve it. But I would like to be able to go to Camp Ripley and say, how many M16s do you have, and how many are you supposed to have? Right? So they should reverse the law giving the HMO leniency to complying with the MDPA. I talked about that. Placing the role, you got that? Sorry, excuse me. I want to change from a modified cash basis to an accrual basis of accounting in the state. There's tons of hidden future liabilities that are out there. People would not pass these laws or vote for these legislators if they knew that if I put this forward, it's going to put a $2 billion future liability against me that we're going to have to pay for. You know, like the LRT. The LRT is going to cost $2 billion. Straight line, it depreciates to zero after 30 years. It is worth nothing. It has to be completely replaced after 30 years. If you had accrual accounting and you could see that in another 30 years, you're going to have to spend all that money over again. It is 83% financed by the public because of low ridership. It would make a different decision. I have 1 more minute. So I will talk about the diversion program real quick that Rebecca Otto said was illegal. This allows your state sheriffs, the highest elected person in the county, to say that you can either pay the $175 state fine or to pay a $75 tuition to take a class on the weekend, and the sheriff can sit down and teach you how to drive. This significantly impacts our safety on the roads by teaching drivers who would normally just pay a fine and go about their daily business to sit down. It is the choice of the citizen to pay the fine or take the tuition, and it is the choice of the sheriff to give it to give those two things. So for a state executive to put policing for dollars over our physical safety is wrong. So I'm going to stand up against that as well. Ooh.
I've got 3 things actually. The first one is you talk about petitioning. All right. Now, when you want a petition to get an auditor in someplace, you are creating a whistleblower situation.
Yes.
Is that something that is a good idea?
Yes, it is under Whistleblower Protection. We'll make sure that they can come talk to me privately if they want to. I'm not going to go out there. If somebody brings me information and says, look, there's theft here and something's going on, then I can start that audit by myself. So, auditing by petition, okay. There should be data sampling. Anybody that's knows about financials knows that you can go in and data sample. Because it's $20 billion worth of funds, you physically cannot audit every single piece that goes into that every year. So you audit small samples of it. So I would still be able to catch things with data sampling, but in the smaller municipalities, instead of burdening the smaller municipalities with government regulation, I would say if you need me to come in, I will come in on your requirement. You will ask me to come in and work for you, and I will come in and work for you. I think it's the way it's supposed to work. I don't think the government should come in and start telling you what to do. I think you should tell the government what to do. So if you ask me to come and audit, I'll come and audit. Otherwise, unless there's a law being broken and there's evidence for it, I'm not going to show up, especially in small municipalities. Why should it happen in a city of 2,500 or 600 or 500? It shouldn't happen.
I love the idea. How can you make sure that communication line's open? Because that's a new concept. They're not going to be ready for that.
Okay. Well, I also will head the Government Information Division, so that I'll be able to put that out through the Government Information Division. There's requirements for whistleblower protections too in the Minnesota state law. You see them when you're in almost any state building. You'll see the Whistleblower Protection Act. It'll be pinned up in a corner somewhere that's readily accessible and people can see. That's already in place. So the Government Information bureau, the division that I'm gonna lead up, will be able to show people how to do that. There will be changes
Right.
once elected.
You mentioned Jim Nobles and the legislative auditor. Now, he's in charge of auditing things like the Metropolitan Council, correct?
Correct.
He's also said that the Metropolitan Council is unconstitutional.
Absolutely unconstitutional.
Do you agree with that?
It is absolutely unconstitutional. It says in the Minnesota Constitution that our legislature is not supposed to farm out or give away their right to taxation. The the Met Council is not a municipal corporation.
It's a bunch of guys.
It is a 403(b)(4) corporation, which is basically a civic organization. So we have a civic organization now that can apply taxes to you. It is an unelected body. So it is taxation without representation. It is against the Minnesota Constitution. It's the reason why we had a revolution in the first place.
Yes.
What's the best way to roll in that auditor under the governmental branch then?
Fire the Metropolitan
Well,
Council.
It's harder than you think.
Jim Nobles has been with the Office of Legislative Auditor since 1983. He has a wealth of information. He is an intelligent person. He is fairly neutral. He gives his opinion. To get rid of Jim Nobles, I would believe, would be a huge mistake. But to ask him to be giving that information to a state auditor who is elected auditor, and then the elected auditor makes the call, I think that's going to be a much better scenario, because when the elected auditor makes the call and things don't happen, you don't see that person going up to legislation, then you can fire that person. Because that's the issue right now, is that Jim Nobles already said there was problems with it. And the legislation didn't act. And the legislation didn't act because nobody was going to be held accountable, and Jim Nobles wasn't able to use that position as an appointed auditor instead of an elected auditor, to use that position as a bullhorn. And that's what it needs to be. It's called the bully pulpit, and I intend to use it.
That's all fine and good, but there hasn't been anything that came out of the auditor's office in 8 years. They haven't found anything wrong in 8 years. That covers Palente's administration and Dayton's administration. What makes you think that you'll be able to find anything? And if you do, how long would it take you to find it?
8 days. There's problems, all right. I've already had people come and discuss problems with me. Just as campaigning for state auditor, people have called me and said there's problems at the state veterans home and the state VA home, and they're giving that to me. I'm bringing that up with the veteran, the VFW and American Legion, and the people to help work those issues. So people are already bringing issues to me that are within the state, financial problems, investment changes that already should be looked at once they get into office.
Another question over here.
A kind of question, comment. I didn't know your prior service, Keegan, so I really appreciate that. And so we're both ex-Air Force, so I kind of heard a lot of the broadways of abuse when you were hit pretty hard on in the Air Force. And you probably know as well as I do, in the state, we're one of the worst states for employing vets. And I know that's not something that's not necessarily to your position, but you were talking about all these problems that we're having with the VA and such. Because the VA's been all over the news recently. It drives me nuts, and assuming it drives you nuts. Planning. I mean, it's fairly obvious.
Nation building is a failure of central planning. I spent 2.5 years in Iraq at the U.S. Consul General in Basra, and the reason I was there was to help save American lives. As far as the mission in Iraq or the diplomatic mission, I think the diplomatic mission should be held higher in esteem in the United States than the military mission. That way we'd have more diplomats out there and less war. War is expensive.
Hey, maybe diplomats want to stay home and talk on the phone.
Better than war.
It's true, but nothing gets done when you're on the phone.
So,
All right, Les, if you want to wrap up whatever
one
you're
last
saying.
question.
I have a good. Well, I'm just going to say this. Honestly, I was going to say, when you do become auditor, how about you just say, if you want to receive state funds, you better have vets working for you.
Yeah, yes. And that's part of the DB&E program with Minnesota DOT and stuff like that. Is it's a percentage of people are supposed to go, a percentage of the jobs are supposed to go to that type of person. That's within the legislature. As the auditor, I would just make sure that they're in tune with what the legislature's doing. I can't write a law. I'm gonna have to go to the legislature to get these ideas pushed. So that's what I'm gonna do.
I'm gonna smack him in the back of the head because I'm just getting in line.
Well, yeah.
Thank you. I don't require service.
Keegan Iverson.